Hey, it's the eve of the BC Highland Games, and I'm going to be off there tomorrow playing the lowland pipes. But in the meantime, I'm doing this very quickly to send to a client whose kilt this shall be. It's in the McCrae tartan, and we're having the usual long-distance discussion about how to pleat it. Now, if we take a look at it, it's a very, very busy tartan. It's beautiful, but there's a lot of detail. And it looks like it's a small set, but it's not. If we take a look, this set, let's say it begins in the middle of this, let's say it begins in the middle, this element here. It carries on all the way over to here, right? Not there to there. It goes there to there. And that's like an 8-inch set. In fact, let's look at it. It is, in fact, 8 1/16. And this, okay, and it's, yeah. So, in consequence, there's a little more to it than just, saying pleat it to the set, pleat it to the stripe. For starters, as I lay this out, because we have a 43 waist, a 46 hip, I've decided, at least to begin with, that the waist of the apron is going to be 23, because again, on the more mature figure we want, the more prominent figure, we want a bigger apron. And so that when I lay this out in 23 at the waist, 24 at the hip, we find, because I've selected this element, actually wrong, I've selected this element to be the center of the kilt. I could have gone there where it's either or, but the reason why I've gone to this point is at 24 inches I only have a little more than enough, because I tend to go for a handspan, right? But if I go here, I have a little less than enough. And so I've brought it over a half, shall we say, a half set, so that I've got a full handspan plus a strip, because we want to do the usual fringed edge. But I do notice that when we do this, even though we're perfectly centered on this element, as we lay it out from left to right, it's not completely symmetric, because the left edge of this front apron at the hip is right about there, as you can see on the green, but at the right side, it's on the red. See, it comes to there as opposed to the green. It falls on the right side, it comes to there, but on the left side, it comes to there. It's one of these cases where we say, oh, well, it is what it is. And it's not going to be a problem that might have been on some larger tartans, where you can look across the room and say, that's not quite symmetric. Because two things, we have the curvature of the apron when he's wearing it, and we have the detail of the fringe on the edge. So the cloth is telling us, like, no, sorry, pal, this is what it has to be. But I think it's still going to look okay, right? So 24 at the hip, 23 at the waist. Because it's such a very large set, if I rob 1.5 repeats, I get the proper amount of deep pleat, which is about 1/4 of the total width. Between 1/4 and 1/3 is what we want. And I've already done the exercise on the other end for the inner apron and got the same. But I only get 25 repeats between the two. Now, ordinarily, I would show every option for pleating and then step back and let the customer make his mind up before I weight it in. And how strongly I weight it in is becoming weaker over time, because one customer wants a slimming effect, the other customer doesn't want the slimming effect. One customer actually wanted, the antithesis of the slimming effect, bootylicious. Okay, that's what he wants, that's what he's going to go for, that's what he'll have, that's his kilt. But in this case, I'm really reluctant to pleat to the set, because it is so very busy. There's we have a couple of strong elements here, but seen from any distance at all, it's just going to look kind of meh, really, and because maximum 25 pleats, if we pleat this to the set, we're going to have no more than 23 pleats, maybe 21, maybe even 19 pleats. And the problem there is, when we have fewer pleats, they are therefore wider. And because they're wider, as they taper, from hip to waist, we run the very real risk of having an element of the tartan vanish into the seam. So let's take that white line, for example, and I'm just doing this as an example. I haven't done the actual numbers for this, but to have an element vanish into the seam is simply not on. We can't have that. It looks terrible. It's not on the table. So wider pleats with elements vanishing to the seam, we really can't have that. And because there isn't such a tremendous difference between the waist and the hip, that if we pleat the pleats to be absolutely parallel top to the bottom, they're not going to drape very well. We need a bit of an A-line. We need it. Even if somebody is completely cylindrical, we still need an A-line, right? So what I'm going to recommend to them is that we have basically a couple of ways of pleating to the stripe. And what I've just pinned up here is I'm doing it, instead of doing it to the red line centered on the blue, which after all is going to be 8 inches and a fairly deep pleat. You know, it's got to be it's a 4-inch deep pleat. We can get the proper taper from, because I have done those numbers, from between 3/4 and 7/8. So the 3/4 of the waist, 7/16. No, hold on, that's not right. 3/4 of the waist and 7/8 minus, shall we say, at the hip, that we're going to get a very, very subtle taper. No element is going to be lost within the pleat. We're also going to get the maximum number of pleats because we need that richness. We need that sumptuous effect of more rather than less pleats. The other option we can do is alternating between a red line centered on the blue and a red line centered on the green, which is what I've done here. So there's to the blue, here's to the green. And it's a rather subtle effect because you have to be quite close to actually see that this one's to the blue and these are to the green. That one's to the blue. But to the eye, even though you're not, I believe, and I don't think that I'm making this up. I'm gonna sit on this and look on this a bit more. But it increases our number of pleats. It adds a certain extra richness to it, which is very, very subliminal. It's almost lost. But it also gives us the strongest possible vertical effect, which I believe we wish in this case. So I'm gonna put this video up, let the customer see it, see what he thinks, and then the moment I return from the Highland Games tomorrow, I'm hoping to have his reply so that I can get to work on this, because he's showing up in a week for a fitting for his formal dress, his Charlie coat, his waistcoat, his tie and everything else. And I want to have this to the position where I can do a forward fitting. So there we go. Hope that made sense, or it didn't muddy the waters further at least. So carry on, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Thank you.